Afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Labour promises a massive increase in education spending in England and says it'll raise corporation tax by over a third to pay for it all. The Conservatives say the plans are nonsensical. We'll hear from both parties.
The Green Party says it will no longer push for what it calls progressive alliances, accusing Labour and the Lib Dems of failing to consider electoral pacts between broadly left-wing parties. Green Party leader Caroline Lucas joins us live.
We brought the mood box to Chester to ask people whether they think UKIP have had their moment in the sun.
Series on smaller parties contesting the election. Today we speak to the leader of the Women's Equality Party. So all that in the next hour. With us for the duration, the UKIP leader, Paul Nuttall. Welcome back to the programme.
Cheers.
Now, in the last hour, the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, has announced that no criminal charges are to be brought over 14 police inquiries into Conservative Party election spending in the 2015 general election. One file from Kent Police remains under consideration, though we won't hear today whether charges will be brought in relation to that investigation. Let's go straight to our Home Affairs correspondent, Tom Simons. Tom, bring us up to date. What's happened here?
Well, this one's been running for a long time, Andrew. Followed an investigation by Channel 4 News into the way in which parties were funding their candidates' campaigns in various constituencies. Now, the latest is that the police in 14 different parts of England have been looking into this. They passed files to the Crown Prosecution Service to see whether there would be charges, and today the CPS has said in all of those 14 cases there will be no charges. Why? Well, it's down to the law involved, and the law effectively says this. It says that it is an offence to knowingly make a false declaration. In order to bring a charge, therefore, it must be proved that a suspect did know that they were acting dishonestly in declaring their election expenses. And clearly the CPS has decided that that is not the case in all of these situations around the country. And largely we're talking about the Conservatives' battle buses that travelled around the country, putting activists into various places to help with local campaigns. The Conservatives always said that was national spending. It didn't breach their national spending limits. And the CPS is clearly saying there is nothing criminal here.
Well, that'll no doubt come as a relief to the Conservatives, because this was certainly hanging over them. But there is still one case outstanding in Kent. Do we know when we might hear about that?
I think shortly, Andrew, within the next week or so. But there's a problem, because the date, the cut-off date for candidates to take part in the general election is tomorrow. So if you want to out or if you want to come into the race, you have to say by tomorrow. And we are not going to hear about this Kent case until next week. Now, the Kent case is, we understand about the South Thanet seat and about the way in which party resources were put into that seat, whether, again, it was national spending or local spending that was involved. But it does mean that that will have to be left hanging, and that theoretically, unless the Conservatives want to choose another candidate in the next 24 hours, they will have to continue with the team and the candidate in place, Andrew McKinley, in place that it currently has in South Thanet. So still a bit of a headache for the Conservative Party. But they're very pleased with today's announcement. They're saying that the CPS has confirmed what we knew all along, that Conservative candidates did nothing wrong. These were politically motivated and unfounded complaints. So this is from Patrick McLaughlin, the chair of the party, that have wasted police time. And they say a number of false and malicious claims continue to be spread on the internet. And they interestingly say that people should be aware that making false claims about a candidate's personal character and conduct is an electoral offence. So some hard-hitting responses there from the Conservatives.
Tom, thanks for that. Thanks for bringing us up to date.
Andrew, it's another busy day in the election campaign. And for the latest, I'm joined from College Green by Katie Balls from The Spectator and Stephen Bush from The New Statesman. Welcome to both of you there outside in the sunshine. Let's kick off this morning with Theresa May hosting the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. I think we can show you pictures of them both at number 10. Oh, no, we have Jeremy Corbyn instead. Let's remove that clip for the moment and we'll come to it in just a moment. Anyway, if we haven't got the pictures, they were together at number 10. It wasn't just a courtesy call. Jens Stoltenberg apparently would like some commitment from Theresa May in terms of more British troops in Afghanistan. Stephen Bush, what would that do to an election campaign, recommitting British troops to a combat role?
Well, you'd assume that it would bring the issue of our foreign involvement in Afghanistan deeply controversial with the public, an issue where Jeremy Corbyn has always opposed further foreign involvement. So perhaps it helps Labour, but it also would be punching their bruise on security issues. So it's hard to see who benefits if defence becomes an election issue.
Right, and what do you think, Katie, in terms of Labour and in terms of Jeremy Corbyn's response to a call like this from NATO?
I mean, he said he wouldn't be happy to agree to a request like that, or that's what he's suggested. And that kind of makes sense. It fits with his non-interventionist approach to no military action. And I think actually a lot of the public might agree with it. It's a very lukewarm reaction probably to sending more troops to Afghanistan. But because May, wants Britain to be outward-looking post-Brexit, I also think she'll want to kind of keep these NATO commitments.
What about our actual commitments already in terms of spending? We are commitment of spending 2%. But actually in the papers this morning there is a letter saying that Mrs May's boasts of spending that amount are actually an accounting deception. What do you make of that, Stephen Bush?
Well, we kind of know that there is a lot of creative accountancy about how you get to that 2% defence target, and we sort of expect that to be a kind of underlying subplot of the election. But again, Labour doesn't want this to be an election about national security.
Right, and Katie Balls, will it become an issue, do you think, national security at all, or will this just pass by as another day on the election campaign trail?
I think we saw last week when David Davis and Philip Hammond stood in front of a poster of a bomb, and they said, Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't give up bombs to the army, but they're quite happy on defence. And I think Labour are also unhappy on defence. I mean, the Shadow Defence Secretary has suggested that what they would do is maybe, give more money to the army. But I think a lot of people still wouldn't be happy voting for Jeremy Corbyn, given his comments on whether or not he would kill the leader of ISIS.
What about Jeremy Corbyn, his comments on Europe, Stephen Bush? Yesterday, he seemed to say that actually the issue of Brexit was settled, and then in interviews couldn't quite answer the question about whether if he were Prime Minister he would actually take Britain cleanly out of the EU. What did you make of what seemed to be confusion? It was cleared up later by aides.
It seemed very strange, partly because obviously Jeremy Corbyn is a lifelong Eurosceptic other than about 6 months before the referendum. So it should be an easy question for him, but for some reason Labour stumbled on it and it was a bit of a mystery.
Right. And Katie Balls again, do you think it was just a stumble, or do you think there was more to it than that?
I think it's just typical of Labour at the moment. The whole Brexit strategy seems to be based on, the greatest upset to the greatest number. They seem to say one thing, that the issue of Brexit is settled, and I'm sure that will help lots of, would-be Labour Brexit voters. And then he goes on to refuse to say 7 times whether Britain's actually going to leave the EU, which will just annoy those voters.
Right, last night, of course, we had the hard-hitting interview with the Mays, Theresa and Philip, on The One Show. Let's take a quick look.
How hard is it to win a negotiation with your wife?
Oh, that's a good question. Been taken every marriage, isn't it?
Of course.
Yeah. I get to decide when I take the bins out, not if I take the bins out.
But, I mean, of
There's
course...
boy jobs and girl jobs, you see.
There's boy jobs and girl jobs.
What boy and girl jobs?
I definitely do the taking the bins out. I do the traditional boy jobs, by and large.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're the kind of man who expects his tea to be on the table at 6 o'clock every evening, you could be a little bit disappointed.
No. Do you make the tea?
From time to time.
From time to time.
Teresa's a very good cook. Teresa's a very, very good cook indeed, actually. And you have a large number of cookery books.
I have a large number of cookery books, yes. At home, obviously, we live in the flat in Downing Street, but we like to get home at weekends, and that's where most of my cookery books are.
Katie, how do you think that interview went in terms of Tory HQ and Theresa May?
Well, I don't think it looked like it was either of the two's natural habitat. It was quite awkward to watch. And but at the same time, I think CCHQ were quite keen to kind of show Theresa May's more personal side. She's seen as being very no-nonsense, so maybe they wanted to show that there is a softer side to her, which it probably did achieve, even if there were a few awkward moments.
Right. I mean, but nothing went wrong, did it, Stephen Bush? So do you think overall it was positive for them?
Yeah, I mean, it will have irritated people like me with the boys' jobs, girls' jobs thing, but she doesn't really need those votes. It showed her to be a warm home counties woman. I think it was a good hit in terms of the voters they're targeting.
Right, well, I hope you feel we split the jobs evenly between the two of you. Thank you very much. Paul Nuttall, would you like to appear on a show like that?
Not particularly. It's not really my cup of tea, to be honest with you. I think there's a fine balance, isn't there, between your public life and your private life, and we all deal with it differently. It's horses for courses, really. I think there's a danger sometimes with spouses that they can become too involved. I think Sherry Blair is the perfect example of that. I could argue that Michelle Obama maybe had a bit too much influence over the White House when she was indeed the First Lady. So it's horses for courses. It isn't for me. But, you know, if it's for Theresa May, good on air.
Right, but the public, of course, quite like to see, as they say, the sort of personal side. Would it worry you would you feel uncomfortable having to do that more personal stuff?
No, not particularly. I mean, I've done a number of interviews, you know, about on a more personal level. I have to say that I've always been very keen to keep my private life private, my public life public. But again, it's horses for courses, isn't it? And, you know, if Theresa May wants to go on shows like that and bring her husband out, then fine. You know, that's entirely up to her.
So how are we going to do the girls' jobs, boys' jobs thing on this programme?
Well, as usual, I'll be doing the girls' jobs.
Well, that's cleared up then. Now, it's time for our daily quiz, and the question for today is, crime writer James Patterson has joined forces with which political figure to write a thriller set in the White House? Is it A, Bill Clinton, B, Hillary Clinton, C, Nigel Farage, or D, Barack Obama? And at the end of the show, Paul Nuttall will give us the correct answer.
Now, Labour says it'll hike up business taxes to fund a major increase in education spending if it wins the election. The party's plans call for what it calls a National Education Service in England, which would see class sizes for 5 to 7-year-olds kept below 30, while almost £5 billion extra would be pumped into the English school system by 2022. It will cost almost £6 billion when you send money to Scotland and to Wales for education as well. Labour says it'll all be funded by increasing corporation tax up to 26%. It's currently 19%. So, Joko, does it all add up?
Well, Labour have today said that they'll create what they call a National Education Service. Under the plans, a future Labour government would give schools a real terms funding increase, reduce class sizes to under 30 for 5 to 7-year-olds and give free school meals to all primary school children. And Labour would also restore the educational maintenance allowance for college students, scrap fees on courses for adult learners and put more money into maintenance grants for university students. Let's take a look at Labour's Shadow Education Secretary Angela Rayner speaking about this earlier today.
We will secure the best education possible for every single child by getting the basics right. And that starts with proper funding of our schools. We will reverse the £3 billion of cuts that our schools currently face by 2020 and protect per pupil funding over the course of the next Parliament. And unlike the Tories, when we say real terms, we mean real terms.
Angela Rayner there. Well, to fund their proposals, Labour say they would give schools in England an extra £4.8 billion a year. The money would be paid for by raising corporation tax. It would go up to 26% by 2021. It's currently at 19%, as Andrew said. The Conservatives say Labour have already spent the extra revenue from corporation tax, and they've described Labour's plans as nonsensical. Well, this is what the Institute for Fiscal Studies had to say about Labour's corporation tax plans earlier.
The Labour Party proposals would certainly raise more than enough from corporation tax to pay for these increases in school funding. But of course, an increase in corporation tax has significant economic effects. It will reduce investment by companies in the UK, and in the long run, it won't raise as much as it might in the short run as companies change their behaviour, reduce investment, or indeed move abroad.
Joining me now from Birmingham is the Shadow Business Minister, Jack Dromey, and in the studio I'm joined by the former Education Secretary, Michael Gove. Welcome to you both. Jack Dromey, let me come to you first.
Sure.
When you look at the figures, it looks like by 2021 you're going to spend over the UK an extra £6 billion for education, just a little shy of that. And you say it can all be paid for by raising corporation tax by a third. But haven't you already spent some of that corporation tax on other things?
Labour founded the National Health Service. Now we are determined to establish a National Education Service. You have to fund those commitments. We will fund them from corporation tax. What we will do is progressively to raise the corporation tax from 19 to 26%. and that will fund a very ambitious pledge to the young people of this country, to their parents, and to the teachers of this country. And in terms of commitments, we are now into a general election period. And therefore, we are determined, Andrew, that every single pledge we make, we cost so that the British people can be confident that we will not only make the pledge, but unlike the Tories who always break their promises, we will deliver on the pledge.
OK, well, let's just look at this, because I thought you'd already promised to use corporation tax to give pay rises above inflation to NHS staff.
We are making commitments now in relation to a general election. We've been looking at hang on, let me finish. We've been looking at a whole range of commitments that might be made. You will hear in relation to the NHS, the announcement we've already made. If you look at the totality of what can be raised on that increase of corporation tax over the next 4 years, it's actually £50 billion, in excess of £50 billion.
Well, these are your own figures. These are not what the IFS or even the OBR say. But let me come back. You say you're in an election campaign. Let me just clarify. Is it your plan now not to pay for the increase in NH staff pay by corporation tax?
We will honour our commitment to health service staff.
Yeah, but will you finance it from the corporation tax revenues?
The commitment made by John Ashworth is a commitment that we will honour. And the interesting thing about the IFS...
But how will you finance it?
The interesting thing, Andrew, about the IFS is that today they have said our figures are sound. They've raised a question mark over what will be the economic impact. I think our very strong view is this. We've got a chronic problem in this country of skills and productivity, and we have to sort that.
I understand the case.
Crucial
I'm trying to work out how you're going to pay for it. On this programme, your head of campaigns, you said you're in an election period, your head of the election campaign, Andrew Gwynn, said categorically that you would use corporation tax to fund a pay rise for the NHS. So is that still your policy or not?
We stand by that commitment, and I stress again...
And the financing of it?
Yes, the totality of what can be raised in terms of what we're proposing on corporation tax is in excess of £50 billion.
Well, you've accumulated that. Tell me, how much by 2021, how much extra will corporation tax be bringing in under your scheme?
Under our scheme, it will raise in excess of £50 billion.
No, you've added up all the years. I'm asking you, by 2021, how much extra that year will corporation tax bring in?
In excess of £50 billion, Andrew.
No, that's over 4 years, Mr. Dromey. It won't bring in £50 billion in 1 year. The total corporation tax receipts at the moment are £50 billion. You cannot bring in £50 billion extra in 1 year.
No. Look, can I suggest this? Don't interview yourself. Allow me to answer the question.
Can I suggest you answer the question?
We're very clear, and the IFS have said that our figures are sound. We're very clear that we're very clear that we can raise in excess of £50 billion. That will enable us to fund our education pledge, but other pledges as well. We stand by that.
You've pledged, or Mr. Corbyn has pledged, to scrap university tuition fees. Is that going to be paid for by a rise in corporation tax?
Wait until the manifesto. Today we're focusing on our education commitments in terms of that National Education Service, schools and post-school, particularly for the colleges.
Right.
At the next stages, we will be moving on to the universities and tuition fees. Wait for our manifesto.
So the tuition fees are not included in the extra £6 billion you're already committed to?
No. That will be in the manifesto.
Let me come on to this business of regarding corporation tax as a sort of magic money tree. What assumptions in your calculations have you made that if corporation tax is increased by 1/3, that companies will change their behaviour and that you will not get as much as you project? What assumptions have you made about that?
Andrew, we need badly to invest in the next generation.
I'm not arguing about that.
Crucial to the success of our country, including the economic success of our country.
I'm not arguing about that.
I stress again, we have to resolve this problem of productivity and skills.
My question to you, Mr. Dromey, was what assumptions have you made as you project a rise in corporation tax, as you increase the rates, that companies will change their behaviour and you won't get the money that you're hoping for?
Companies, of course, will take into account impacts upon them in terms of taxation. But Andrew, we will still be the lowest corporation tax in the G7 countries.
Well, you won't be, actually.
And if you compare,
well, you won't be, Mr. Dromey. Let's just look at this. You've raised it. You are the business spokesman for your party. Donald Trump is pledging to cut corporation tax to 15%. Mr. Macron in France is pledging to cut corporation tax too. Just across the Irish Sea is a place called Dublin, where corporation tax is 12%. So if you go to 26%, yes, you may well raise more money, but as shadow business secretary, you must surely have some calculations that you will lose some because people will simply move.
It's a statement of truth that 26% right now is still the lowest in the G7. And if I was you, I would not rely upon pledges made by Donald Trump.
Well, we're relying on your pledges to fund our education system.
And you can count upon our pledges because it comes back to this simple reality in economic terms. In economic terms, this country will not succeed and its young people will not succeed unless we have a national education service that backs them, their parents and their teachers.
Let me just clarify this one more time. You are projecting increased revenues on a raising of corporation tax over 4 years by 1/3. And your assumptions and your projections assume that companies will not in any way change their behavior and that you'll get that money. How is that in any way credible?
Of course, companies will take account of taxation in terms of decisions that they make. But the companies I deal with here in Birmingham, all over the country, all say the same thing. We can't get labour. We can't get skilled labour. We need investment in skills for the future.
You've made that point. It's not what I'm asking you.
Well, but and what will be of major benefit, not just to the young people who will get on in life, but what will be of major benefit to the public sector, private sector, and the economy in this country is if we have many more people equipped with the education they deserve and skills. It's absolutely central, Andrew, to the economic success of Britain.
I understand that, but my argument with you has been how to pay for it. But I think we've done now. I understand your press office you want to take part in the discussion with Mr. Gove, but if you want to stay and listen to what he has to say and perhaps even come back for a comment, you're welcome to do so, or you're welcome to go now. What would you like to do?
I'm happy to stay, and perhaps he can answer this question.
Well, no, I ask the questions, Mr. Dromey.
You ask the question, and I'll come back at the end, OK?
Whatever the mechanism for funding an increase in education, particularly for schools, is it not clear that our schools do need more funding?
I think that our schools need reform and our schools need healthy funding, but it is the case that the Conservatives have safeguarded the amount overall that goes into schools in real terms, and in cash terms, the amount per pupil has been safeguarded.
Well, the National Audit Office, which I think we can both agree is a pretty reliable monitor of these things and independent, in real terms, schools will have to find cuts of £3 billion. That's 8% by 2020. Labour is talking about raising money for education. We can argue how they're going to fund it, but they're talking about putting more in. You, in reality, in real terms, are cutting.
Well, I'd say two things. It is the case that the amount per pupil in real terms is protected in cash terms, but in real terms, you are right that we are asking schools to deal with the consequences of tighter budgets. But let's be fair. Before 2015, we protected per pupil funding in real terms, and at a time when other parts of the public sector were having to take the strain, schools received a better deal. I sympathise with the position that heads and teachers have. But it's critical to appreciate that it's not simply funding that improves education.
I understand
it's reform as well.
But you can't do it without money. I mean, the mantra has been reform and money.
Indeed.
And your manifesto last time, page 2034, said, as the number of pupils increase, so will the amount of money in our schools. On current pupil numbers forecast, there will be real terms increases. You've broken that promise. There are not real-term increases per pupil.
There are real-term increases overall, you're right. But it's also the case that...
Not per pupil.
No, but that was the case between 2010 and 2015.
No, but it's the case coming up now that there will not be real terms increases per pupil in the 2-3 years ahead. There will
that's
not
correct.
be. Well, at a time when, and you heard Jack Dromey saying there, how important skilling the population is. You were part of the Brexit campaign. We need to be better educated, better skilled than ever. Why would any government contemplate cutting in real terms per pupil funding?
Well, there are two things. The first thing is the overall increase in the school population has been driven by a variety of factors, a baby boom and also migration under Labour, which was not controlled. You mentioned Brexit. By leaving the European Union, we'll be better able to control migration.
That's going to take some time. You've not done so far.
Well, you were kind enough to raise Brexit, so I naturally reciprocated by...
But these kids are already in the schools.
Indeed.
It doesn't matter if you control it down the road. These kids are going through the primary system now, and you are cutting the per head funding in real terms.
You'll be aware, Andrew, that 1.8 million more children are in good and outstanding schools compared to 2010. You'll also be aware, I'm sure, that education in England has been improving, while education in Scotland and Wales has been moving backward. I think you'll also be aware that the free schools that we've created have created good school places in areas where they did not exist before. Now, naturally, we do need to ensure that funding is reformed, and the Education Secretary is seeking to reform funding in order to make it fairer. But if you concentrate simply on cash and don't look at the broader context of what is happening in our schools, then you fall into the trap of believing that more money automatically and of itself is the answer to our educational challenges.
I'm not falling into that trap, but I am looking at
the Labour
funding.
have. And not only have they fallen into that trap, they've also, as you eloquently...
Let me ask you this.
No, let me make my point. As you eloquently pointed out in the course of that interview, Labour are going to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Labour's approach towards corporation tax is not going to raise a sustainable sum of money that will support our schools into the future. It will change the behaviour of businesses. It will lead to a flight of capital, and it will lead to the economy once again being crashed because of Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell's nonsensical approach towards economics.
Let me ask you this, which plays to perhaps the ideological approach your party now has to education, that as schools in England are being asked to find £3 billion of cuts, Philip Hammond is able to find another 320 million for grammar schools. Where's the sense in that?
Well, we're giving people choice.
But you're cutting the money that goes to the kind of schools, you're asking for cuts to the kind of schools that most children go to.
We're actually ensuring that every child, whether they're in a grammar school, a comprehensive or any other type of school, will have the money following them protected in cash terms. And I think it's... You Andrew, have written and argued in the past for the merits of selective education. New selective provision will only be set up where there is a popular demand for it.
Actually,
and critically...
I'm not sure that I have, even going back into the dim and distant past when I had a view, but let me ask you this. Are you in favour of grammar schools?
Yes, I am.
More grammar schools?
I believe that selection where people want it should be extended.
So why didn't you increase grammar schools when you were Education Secretary?
There are many things that I did as Education Secretary and many things which I didn't do as Education Secretary, which I would have loved to have done.
You were against them as Education Secretary.
The critical thing is that whether I was for them or against them, I am in favour of increased selection. We increased selection at the age of 16, but we were not able to increase selection anywhere else because the Liberal Democrats, for understandable reasons, were not in favour.
But my understanding is you didn't push for it. We'll come back to that. Paul Nuttall's been patient. Then I'm going to go back for a comment from Jack Dromey. Thank you for waiting too. What are your thoughts as you hear this debate, Paul Nuttall?
Oh, well, firstly, I don't think raising corporation tax is a good idea. I think it's a bad idea. I think Michael's absolutely right. It will result in a flight of capital. As you mentioned earlier, Ireland has a corporation tax rate of 12.5%. I think Donald Trump will bring it down to 15%. And what you'll see is business leave these shores. That will mean less tax revenues. It'll mean less work for people. I think it's a bad idea. However, what I will say is we do really need to reform our education system. And UKIP was the first party to come out in favour of grammar schools all the way back in 2010.
All right. Jack Dromey, what's your reaction to what you've heard from Michael Gove?
I live in the real world. In my constituency, the schools face a £10 million cut. I led a delegation of excellent head teachers to meet with the schools minister. They said, we're going to have to sack teachers. We're going to have to sack teaching assistants. We're going to have to cut back on our curriculum. We're going to have to close the school at Friday lunchtime. And they asked the government, what do you expect us to do? You're making life for us. And so it's absolutely right, therefore, that what we've done is to listen to schools, to listen to young people and to listen to parents and put them first.
But there is not a single idea that Labour has on education which will actually lead to an improvement in the classroom. Labour have opposed every single one of the steps that we've taken to improve testing, to improve the curriculum and to give parents more choice. And this talk of a national education service, is a Trojan horse for getting rid of academies, getting rid of free schools, getting rid of the rigorous curricular changes that we've made. And the terrible truth is that Jack and Jeremy Corbyn want to move us backwards, not forwards.
All right. Jack Dromey, thanks for being patient.
Thank you.
And waiting. Michael Gove, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Now, 3 Labour Party activists in Surrey have been expelled from the party after they decided to back a candidate who is standing for the National Health Action Party against the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. Well, we can speak now to Steve Williams, who was one of those members kicked out of the party, calling himself one of the Godalming Three. Now, you've been formally expelled from the Labour Party after nearly 50 years, apparently, as a supporter. But you must have seen it coming. You must have known that that's what would happen if you backed a rival candidate.
Well, I think it's very disappointing, Jo, to be honest with you. I have, as you say, I've been a member of the Labour Party for 46 years, and I have been expelled from the Labour Party for actually doing my best to try to secure the outcome of defeating a Conservative MP, a Member of Parliament for South West Surrey, who, as Secretary of State for Health, has done untold damage to the National Health Service.
But you understand the rules, don't you? You understand the party's rules because you are a long-time member, and they're very clear that if you publicly support a candidate that is running against the official Labour Party candidate, then you will be expelled. In fact, it happened to Ken Livingstone many years ago when he ran for mayor.
Well, what we're seeking to do actually is to get the Labour candidate to stand down in the constituency. It's the overwhelming view of Labour Party members in South West Surrey that the candidate that has been selected for the South West Surrey constituency should be stood down.
And your party's branch agreed to that, didn't they? There was agreement locally for the Labour Party candidate to stand down, and was it Labour's ruling party executive, the NEC, who actually went over your heads?
It was indeed. I have a letter from the head office of the Labour Party saying that I've been removed from the membership register of the Labour Party for actually trying to secure the return of a non-Conservative Member of Parliament for South West Surrey.
You can
and
understand.
This is happening all over the country. There are people who are seeing that it is appropriate for Labour Party members and supporters, and for Liberal Democrat members and supporters, and for Green members and supporters in different parts of the country to stand down their candidates, to stand aside for the candidate who is best placed to defeat the Conservative. There is a regressive alliance of the right. UKIP are supporting Conservative members of Conservative candidates in this election in order to defeat the left.
But you
so
can
why
understand,
can't the progressive side of politics do the same?
You can understand, though, Steve Williams, from Labour's point of view, the party, the leadership, and its ruling executive, that this is the official opposition, and it should be fielding candidates in every seat and should be able to win as many of those seats as possible. If you do what UKIP has done to some extent by agreeing to stand down candidates, you admit in the public's mind that you cannot put up a proper opposition against the ruling party.
No, Labour is the alternative party of government in this country, and I want to see Jeremy Corbyn at number 10 Downing Street, and it is precisely with that in view. And there are precedents for the Labour Party standing down its candidates. In 1997, in Tatton, there was a deeply unpopular Conservative Member of Parliament in Neil Hamilton, who is now moved over to UKIP, a deeply unpopular Member of Parliament, and the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats stood down in Tatton. They stood down in Tatton in order to enable Martin Bell to stand as a unity candidate. And we've got that unique opportunity in South West Surrey now. We have got the opportunity to defeat one of the most unpopular Secretaries of State for Health that we have had in this country.
OK, just very briefly, yes or no, will you reapply reapply to join the Labour
in terms
Party?
of the National Health Service. I'm sorry, Joe?
Will you reapply to join the Labour Party?
Of course I will. The
All right.
Labour Party is in my soul. I want to remain a member of the Labour Party. I didn't leave. I was thrown out.
Steve Williams, thank you very much.
Caroline Lucas, joint leader of the Green Party, had been calling for a progressive alliance, but yesterday claimed Labour and the Lib Dems had betrayed their voters and the Green Party would now focus on their own prospects. She joins us now. Now, when we last spoke, you were down the line, I think you were at your conference in Bristol, and you were quite enthusiastic about a progressive alliance. What's gone wrong?
What's gone wrong is that the leadership, people around Jeremy Corbyn, have absolutely put the lid on this happening. And I think why I said that's a betrayal, which is quite a strong word, but it feels like without some kind of cooperation and a handful of marginal seats between left and centre-left candidates, we know how the story ends. We know that we wake up on June the 9th thinking, how on earth have we allowed a massive Tory landslide? So there's huge appetite for this with grassroots Labour members, as you've just seen with Steve Williams. And I think what's so sad is that all of this excitement up and down the country, I've been speaking at public meetings, right across the country, huge amount of enthusiasm for it, but it's being stopped by the party leadership.
So if it's stopped at a national level, if the national leadership in Labour doesn't like it, could it still happen at a local level?
Well, I think the example we've just heard with Steve Williams shows that they won't let it happen at that level.
Because if Labour people were to join in on that, then they get kicked out.
They'd be expelled. And I just think, this is not just about trying to get rid of the Tories, although it is that, but it's also about trying to return people to Parliament who will fight for a fairer electoral system. So we don't have to have all of these debates about tactical voting, so people can vote for what they believe in. Over 1 million people voted Green in 2015 under a proportional system that could have given us 24 MPs. That would have been a better representation of views across the country than the current electoral system that we have.
At last year's by-election in Richmond, who offered the Green Party £250,000 to stand aside in favour of the Lib Dems?
I don't know the name of the person. I know of the incident that you're talking about, but it happened after the decision had already been taken to stand down and the money was not accepted. So any kind of implication that we were standing down in order for money is absolutely wrong, categorically wrong. It happened after the decision was taken and the money was not accepted.
But somebody did offer £250,000.
I believe so. I didn't speak to them directly, but that is my understanding.
But as joint leader of the party, somebody offers your party £250,000, you don't know who it is?
I don't remember the name. I've heard the name, but the point was it went through our ethical checks. It didn't pass our ethical checks. The money was not accepted.
But your candidate did stand aside.
The candidate had already decided to stand aside, as indeed the candidate has decided again, because essentially what we had in the Richmond by-election was the chance to oppose Zach Goldsmith, who had been running a very racist campaign in London, and we wanted to try to get somebody in there who was going to support electoral reform.
Except, and I'm sure you will have seen it, the Guido Fawkes website has a leaked internal document from your Richmond party saying that party staff from the centre added pressure on local activists and said that there was, quote, an offer of a large donation conditional on the party demonstrating its desire for a progressive alliance.
Andrew, this has all been completely exposed as being 2 or 3 annoyed people in the Kingston party, in fact, not the Richmond party, who didn't agree with the decision to stand down. And as a result, they put out a document that has been absolutely criticised, condemned by our Green Party council. It looked into this. There was an independent investigation into it, which absolutely said that there was no substance to the claims there.
So you're saying that the local chairman of the Kingston Green Party and 2 other members have made this up?
I think they have either been misled themselves or they've been misinformed or somehow false information is in that document. That is what our regional council independently declared. One of them, I think, has already gone off and joined the Labour Party. Instead of going over something that isn't really a story...
This is quite important. I mean,
it isn't important, it's not true.
That if this was true of another party,
if it were
they had
true,
been
Andrew,
offered $250,000 to do something... you would be the first to condemn that kind of approach.
I certainly would. And that's why I'm so robustly challenging, as I have done all along the way, what was in that report. It was absolutely wrong. The decision to stand down...
You don't even know who offered the donation.
Andrew, I don't remember the name because I've never
Why
spoken
would you
to the
not
person.
Remember? I mean, you don't get offered $250,000 every
because
day,
we turned
do you?
it down, Andrew. We turned it down because
But
it did not meet our ethical
but
standards.
This person could well come back and offer up money in a different context. Now, if
Well, our
he's
chief
offering money
executive-
that don't meet your standards, you would need to know who that person is.
The party knows who it is. I'm saying I'm very
Peter.
Andrew. I don't have that name. I came on to talk about the importance of defeating the Tories, who are going to be on course for a landslide Tory victory if we don't get our act together on the left. And that is what I would love to talk about because it's incredibly urgent and
this
important.
is still a matter that needs to be cleared up as
Well, I've
as
cleared it
well.
up for you, Andrew. It is completely false. The regional council has said it's false.
But since you don't know who it is, you're therefore not
I've
able to
forgotten
tell
the man's
if this,
name for the
if this
purposes of this
money-
debate.
If this money has come in another way.
I know perfectly well it hasn't because our chief executive is all over this. Of course it hasn't.
It was the chief executive, according
chief
to the
executive of the
report,
National Party.
that the alleged offer amount of $250,000, the order to stand aside, came on the instruction of the chief executive.
That is completely false. And, you know, the idea that we're spending minutes of valuable national airtime talking about a report by 3 people who have absolutely categorically been shown to be not telling the truth, either by design or by accident, is a real shame because we should be talking about the fact that by working together, one of them isn't anymore because he's just joined the Labour Party. What we should be talking
that
about
could be the Progressive Alliance in action.
Yeah, but it could. But what I want to talk about is the fact that Theresa May is on course for a landslide victory, and that is bad for the people that Labour says it stands for. It's certainly bad for the chances of progressive politics in this country because with the kinds of policies she's going to be putting in place is not just the hard Tory Brexit, but also taking money out of our education system, as you've just been hearing. You know, our NHS is on its knees. The environment is nowhere in the debate and has been nowhere in the debate so far. So I hope you'll have me back tomorrow when we're launching our Environment Manifesto.
I'll have you back if you remember the name of the person that offered you
I will get the figure. But look, the point was,
well, we got
Andrew,
the figure is the name.
Andrew,
anyway, let me
I've
just go to
explained-
the broader issue, because you've answered this.
I have answered absolutely categorically.
You're not standing against Vince Cable in Twickenham, so there are still areas where you're pulling back a bit to allow a non-Tory to get through. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes.
How many seats do you think you'll do that in?
Probably about 10 or a dozen.
About 10. And that'll be largely in favour of the Lib Dems.
No, I think it's essentially when either Lib Dems or Labour will commit to going back to Parliament to fight for a fairer electoral system, one that doesn't give power to a government on less than 24% of the eligible vote. Would you stand aside for £250,000?
No, I will stand. We will stand aside where there is a situation where a real Brexiteer, not a fly-by-night Brexiteer or a 5 to midnight Brexiteer, is in danger. Hang on, yeah, absolutely. Well, basically, who've changed their tune over the years. People who've campaigned with UKIP. People, yeah, well, actually, yeah, she's one of. We're standing against Theresa May, actually. You know, people who've campaigned. I know, yeah. People who've campaigned with us for years. People who've shared platforms with UKIP, campaigned for Brexit. You know.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Caroline Lucas, thank you very much.
Now, during the election, our intrepid reporters will be out and about testing the mood of the nation with our ever-scientific mood box. So, Adam, where has the mood taken you today?
Hi Joe, not very intrepid today because I'm down by the River Dee in the city of Chester and it's absolutely gorgeous. What a nice day. Now, this is an interesting place because at the last election in 2015, the Labour candidate won by just a few votes more than the second place Conservative candidate, and UKIP got 8%. Now, this time round, if UKIP voters perhaps voted for another party or the UKIP candidate stood aside, then that could have a crucial impact on the result. So we've taken the mood box out on the streets of Chester and we're asking people, should the Purple Party pack up or fight on now that Brexit seems to be happening?
They're pretty much. And the Purple one probably won't see very much of them, though.
OK. Sad to see the back of them?
No.
No, just a laugh. Is that a UKIP balloon you've got on your pram? Oh, it's McDonald's Happy Meal. UKIP coloured hair. Is that because you're a mega UKIP supporter?
No, I just love the colour.
How do you think UKIP will do at this election?
Not very well.
Pack up.
Why is that?
Dated.
There we are. When he's 25, do you think the UK Independence Party will still exist?
Unfortunately, I don't think it will. But I think if you're that passionate about your beliefs, The way Labour is at the moment, I think it's very vulnerable, and it's probably looking for a new party that could come in and represent the working class.
Who's the leader of UKIP? No idea. How do you think Paul Nuttall, their new leader, is doing?
Well, I said something would be defamatory, wouldn't it? You know what I
Well, if
mean?
you said something nice, it wouldn't be.
That's not to say nice about him, is it?
Hello, sir. What do you think about UKIP? I like your shades, by the way.
Do you?
Very snazzy.
From Yarmouth.
Oh, look at that. A decanter in the shape of a stormtrooper. An impressive array of drones. A paintball.
100%.
What do you think UKIP should do? Pack up or fight on? UKIP were talking about things like banning the burqa and things like that. Is that up your street?
Yeah, because covering your face and that, you just can't see people.
So you think they should fight on issues like that?
Yeah, fight on with issues like that.
The Brexit vote has happened for leaving Europe, so their purpose has gone in. You can see them kind of scrambling around, appealing to sort of far-right policies. And the only reason why they would stick around is so that something nastier doesn't follow, in my opinion.
Are you like a professor of politics or something?
No, I don't get out much.
Well, there we go. A few people think the party should fight on, but many, many more think it's game over. Thanks very much, City of Chester.
Nuttall, there you go. Our scientific mood box says it all. You're wasting your time, and theirs.
Well, I think that's because of the short-term narrative that we have at the moment. People are believing Theresa May because she's able to talk the talk and act tough on Brexit. When September comes and she really has to start walking the walk, when negotiations start, I think she'll begin to backslide. I'm quite confident that'll happen. And when she does, UKIP will become even more relevant than ever before.
It'll be too late then, won't it, really? Because it's already, as you say, on the slide. I mean, if you want to look at something more scientific, we only have to look at the local elections last week.
Yeah.
I mean, you lost every single council seat you were defending. I mean, that was quite impressive from one point of view. I mean, that's a clear message from the electorate.
Well, look, we always knew that these elections were going to be the most tough that we
Did you
faced.
think you'd lose every single council seat?
Well, do you know, I expected a real bad result, OK? And we knew that these were going to be the most difficult local elections that we were going to fight. They were made doubly difficult by the fact that the Prime Minister called a general election. And indeed, she did her Boadicea impression on the day before the local elections when she had that fight with Jean-Claude Juncker, made it even more difficult. So
but that's politics, isn't it?
Well,
I mean, in a way,
I mean, it was convenient, but it made it very difficult. Politics is cyclical. Politics isn't just about the short term, it's about the long term. And if UKIP stays on the pitch, I believe it will prosper in the future.
But it's going to be difficult to stay on the pitch because, as you say, with regards to Brexit, people, in your own words, are believing Theresa May.
For now.
Yeah, OK, but they're believing Theresa May. And in the meantime, you've got to watch what's been happening within your own party. Aaron Banks, your major donor, says you've crashed the car. Douglas Carswell, who was your only MP until he threw in the towel, says it's over.
Tell you what,
so
Joe,
it's not just from outside, it's from within.
Did you ever think you'd hear Aaron Banks and Douglas Carswell agree on anything?
No. No.
Hang on.
You may be right there. You may have a point there. But
But no, seriously, I mean, this is all short-term thinking. What we need to do is we need
Aaron
to...
Banks says you've crashed the car. That's not short-term. And Douglas Carswell's gone.
Well, look, you know, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because politics will come back onto our turf. What UKIP's got to do is hold its nerve, stay on the pitch, and the future will be very bright, I'm sure.
You lost all those council seats, and these were local elections.
Yeah.
And that's because they don't see you as a party beyond Brexit. So if it continues that people believe Theresa May on the issue of coming out of the... You don't have anything to offer. Yes, you've put forward policies, but people aren't interested in you for those, or not in any large numbers.
Well, firstly, when she begins to backslide, and I think she'll backslide on fisheries, I think there may well be some sort of deal on freedom of movement. I think we may well end up paying this divorce bill. People will feel betrayed. They'll feel let down. Now, where are these people going to go? They're not going to go Lib Dem. They're not going to go Green. They're not going to go Labour. They're going to come back to UKIP in their halls.
Because what are you going to be able to do?
So, in what sense?
Well, in terms of changing her direction on Brexit. If you haven't got any local councillors...
We have.
Or not enough.
But
no, but if you haven't got enough local councillors to put her under pressure, if you haven't got any MPs, if you don't get any in the general election, how are you going to do it?
Well, how do we put David Cameron under pressure to give us the referendum in the first place? Because UKIP goes up in the polls, it stays strong, electorally viable, and I believe that will be the case in the years to come.
But you haven't answered the question about the broader offer. There isn't a broader offer, is there? A powerful broader offer from UKIP on Brexit?
Oh, God, if you look, when you see our manifesto, it will be radical, it will be forward-thinking, and we'll lead the debate. In fact, I think our manifesto, in many ways, will be a decade ahead of its time, because ideas that we put forward now will no doubt end up being the policies of the mainstream political parties, or indeed government policy in 10 years' time.
One of your councillors in Essex quit your party, saying it was a spent force. He was defecting to Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. People are going in all directions from UKIP.
That's the first I've heard.
Right, well, Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was elected to a ward in Clacton. Well, you need to keep up with where they're going. I mean, they are all going in different directions.
It's a strange move, isn't it, I suppose? But then again, we had a Conservative councillor defect to us yesterday. So, look, as I say, UKIP's got to hold its nerve. As I say, this is going to be a difficult election. There's no doubt about that.
You're not going to win any seats.
Well, we may well win a couple, OK? And we're targeting sensibly. We're focusing our resources in terms of manpower, in terms of financial resources, on a small number of seats. So we're not going to have that scattergun approach.
You think two at most?
Look, do you know, we could get over the line in a number of seats this time round. Maybe our vote share won't be as high as it was last, but maybe we'll get over the line. But what I've got to do is to keep this party on the pitch.
You just said, though, that you are waiting for Theresa May to backslide, that she won't actually keep to her commitments in terms of the sorts of... So why are you telling large parts of the country to vote Tory?
Well, we're also telling people in certain seats like Kate Hoey's to go out and vote Labour. Because
but why are you telling them to vote for a Tory party that you don't believe is going to deliver? You're telling parts of the country to tell your supporters...
These are people who are true and real Brexiteers. Theresa May never was. She wanted us to remain in the European Union. She campaigned to remain.
But then you're asking your supporters to vote for her.
No, there are specific seats with specific sitting MPs whereby we will stand aside to ensure that we get the Brexit that we want. In fact, it's quite a moral thing to do, really. It's about putting your country above your party.
Right. I mean, according to Professor Stephen Fisher at Oxford University, the scale of the collapse in UKIP's vote will be one of the most important factors in deciding the scale of Theresa May's victory. Do you accept that?
Well, I think our vote share will go down. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Obviously, we're contesting this election on a sticky wicket because the Prime Minister's being believed at this present moment in time. If there's a move between us and the Conservatives, and I think you've already seen that in the polls, play an important factor. But what we've got to do is to target sensibly on a certain number of seats and then try to get over the line.
Do you think you'll be the last leader of UKIP?
No.
All right.
You finished?
Yep.
Thank you. No, not every politician can command prime time on the One Show or even a slot on the Daily Politics, you know. So what have they been up to back on the election trail? Here's Emma Vardy with our campaign roundup.
Tim Farron boarded a rescue hovercraft as he launched the Liberal Democrats campaign in Burnham-on-Sea. He was taken for a ride in the Lib Dems' former heartlands of the southwest, where the party's hoping to resurface.
Yeah. 2 pots each. Yeah.
Today, the Lib Dems are pledging to spend an extra $7 billion on education.
Angela Rayner, are we talking about 50 children, 5,000 children, 5 million children? I mean, how many are we talking about?
Angela Rayner spoke to LBC about Labour's aim of ensuring no pupil is in a class of more than 30.
It's a significant number. It's not 500 or 5,000. It's significant.
You've said that 3 times.
But when asked how many children that would help, it appeared the Shadow Education Minister hadn't done her homework on the figures.
Go on then, you give it me. Go on,
Right.
If you've got it, you give it me. And it is a substantial number.
yes,
Go for it.
What's wrong with this picture? Mysterious pair of legs without a body, perhaps? Seems Labour's Kate Hoey, or one of her team, attempted to Photoshop her Lib Dem rival George Turner out of the picture, only to make one of those digital-altering schoolboy errors. And look who's campaigning in the New Forest. Desmond Swain took Maggie for a ride and a furry friend. She was pulling pints on Monday, now this.
Oh goodness, this is hard work.
What will Nicola Sturgeon take up next? These steak and haggis pies were the product of an SNP campaign visit in East Dunbartonshire with John Nicholson.
I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't.
After launching Labour's campaign, Jeremy Corbyn found solidarity in song with a busker on the streets of Ashton.
Oh, darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me.
Now, throughout the election campaign, we're taking a look at some of the smaller parties hoping to make gains at the ballot box. Today, we're looking at the Women's Equality Party, who are currently fielding 7 candidates. The Women's Equality Party was founded in 2015. It has 45,500 Twitter followers. They're calling for equality in politics, business and on executive boards through gender quotas. They want to close the gender pay gap, saying that women earn 52% of what men do each year. They're calling for equal maternity and paternity leave, and they want to see gender stereotypes challenged more in education. And we're joined now from Leeds by their leader, Sophie Walker. Sophie, welcome to the Daily Politics.
Hello.
What is it exactly that you're pushing for that women in politics aren't already tackling? We have women's select committees, ministers, women's issues are debated, talked about. Why aren't you just backing the parties or the party that you think best represents women's rights?
Because we've got much better policies and we've got much better candidates. And actually our whole system looks at it differently. What we're offering voters this time round is a better option, a different option, one that flips politics on its head, if you like. What we do is design a system that works for the furthest first. So if you look at the experiences of the single biggest discriminated against group, women, in all of our diversity, then you actually create a political system and policies that work better for everyone.
Do you not think, though, that some of the existing politicians, I mean, of course, we can name the leaders of various parties at the moment, Prime Minister Leanne Wood, Nicola Sturgeon, Caroline Lucas, we've just had on the programme. I mean, they are doing quite well in of themselves, and are they not promoting from within the system the change that you want?
No, that's why we're here. We're bringing new and fresh voices in our candidates, many of whom have never done politics before, and are providing exactly the kind of interesting and different backgrounds which would be so valuable in Westminster. But we're also looking really specifically and closely at how we redesign, for example, investment in the economy. So we will be prioritising a look at how you invest in the social infrastructure of this country. Time and time again, Chancellor after Chancellor stands up and says, you know, oh, here's a great idea to get the economy going, let's invest in physical infrastructure, let's invest in housing and roads and bridges. And what we're saying is that how about if we just look at the other side of that? How about we invest in free childcare? That would have a formative impact on the lives of women right across this country. And on top of that, you would also increase your tax base and you would decrease the number of out-of-work benefits. And that would have a knock-on effect for everybody in a very, very positive way.
Right. I mean, we haven't got time to go through costings, but I mean, in your manifesto, you open with the line, nowhere in the world do women enjoy full equality. I mean, do you really think that the position of women in Western liberal democracies can be compared to the situation experienced by women around the world in the way you've presented it there?
Well, first of all, that's not our manifesto. That's our policy document that we launched in October 2015, and our manifesto is coming shortly.
But you still stand by that?
Yeah, we absolutely stand by that. And this is a classic case of sort of whataboutery, if you like, that we're not allowed to talk about women's equality unless we start from somewhere else. I mean, setting aside the fact that, frankly, if you want a feminist approach to foreign policy, you have to have more feminists in Parliament. I think it's very, very clear that when you look at the statistics right here in the UK,
yes.
Women just don't have the same options. Men outnumber women by 2 to 1 in Parliament. You referred in your introduction to the size of the pay gap.
All right.
We know that women suffered disproportionately from austerity measures that meant that they paid £86 out of every £100 that was spent, that was saved.
All right, so Sophie, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to finish it there because we've run out of time.
Okay.
We were going to do the answer to the quiz. Can you remember the question about who's working with the crime writer?
Hillary Clinton.
No, it's Bill Clinton. It's Bill Clinton. And I was going to ask you if you're a feminist.
We're finished. I'll be back again tomorrow with more reports from the election trail. Bye-bye.
Bye.